You can turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 16 if you want to. We've been talking about different spiritual ships that we need to incorporate in our lives. And as we've been doing that, people have been coming to me and go, "Are you going to talk about this one?" It's like, and they give me this great, I can't even think of one right now, but they give me a great example of one, and I'm like, "No, I hadn't even thought about that one." So we could be in ships for a long time, but we're not going to be. This morning's ship may sound a little bit familiar to you. We're going to be talking about discipleship. If you haven't listened to Mark Thomas's sermon, kind of from a couple weeks ago, rebranding discipleship as apprenticeship, you should do that. Not right now, wait until later. But it was on April the 27th, and you can find that as a podcast or on YouTube or any of those things on April 27th. And Mark gave a great message about the idea of thinking about discipleship as an apprenticeship and the differences of that and how that changes the perspective on those. So some of what you're going to hear today mirrors some of his message, but that's all right. We can never hear it enough. So we're going to begin. I'm really going to give you very little scripture in full, but that's because the scripture is so deep in what we're going on. So we're just going to look at one verse right now, Matthew 16, verse 24. And it says this. It says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'If anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me.'" In fact, some of the verses say, if someone wants to be, one translation says, if someone wants to be my disciple, if you want to be my disciple, then deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And in this verse, I feel like Jesus makes a very simple 3-point outline of what it takes to be a disciple, of what it means to really be a disciple, to be the person who's going to commit their life to him and to him alone. And so, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. So Jesus says, listen, if you're going to be a disciple, if you are a disciple, you're going to deny yourself. It's the mark of a disciple. You're going to deny yourself. This denying ourselves, this is an act of surrender. It's an act of giving up your own rights to follow his path in your life, giving up your will to follow his. I'm going to deny myself. It's an act of surrender. You might think of it this way. It's also an act of reprioritizing, right? Jesus reprioritized his life when he was in the garden, right? Not necessarily reprioritized, but reminded himself of the priorities that he needed to have when he was in the garden. And he's like, listen, I don't know that I really want to go through with this. And so he's praying to the Father, if there's any other way for this to happen, then let's find that out. I love it. There's certain imagery that I get from my dad every once in a while. I really did pay attention sometimes, but one of the things that I remember my dad saying is, as he was preaching about that particular passage, you may have heard me talk about this before, when he's talking about that passage of Jesus in the garden, right? He said, for some reason, as he was studying that one time, God just placed the image of Isaiah. It's not Isaiah. My head this morning is just, I don't know where it's at, of Abraham and Isaac. Thank you. Abraham and Isaac, when he took his son up on the mountain, right, to sacrifice him, right? And then God, in the middle of that, sent a lamb and said, don't sacrifice your son Isaac. Instead, I'm sending you a lamb. Well, Jesus is in the garden, right? And he's going, is there another way for this to happen? And he's looking around going, where's my lamb? Where's this alternate plan that maybe we can follow so that I don't have to go through this? Where's the sheep that I need in order for this to not be happening in my life? But Jesus prioritized his life, right? This is this whole thing of denying. If you're going to be a disciple, you're going to have to deny yourself, and you're going to have to go, listen, it doesn't matter what happens. I want the will of the Father over my own will to happen. So it's reprioritizing. If you're going to be a disciple, you're going to have to deny yourself, and that means reprioritizing what's really important. And this is an act, this denying yourself is an act of rejecting what anyone else thinks or what anyone else wants. Scripture says that, I haven't come to you to unite things together. I've come to pit father against son and son against father and mother against daughter. And I've come to do those things. And so when you follow Jesus, when you deny yourself, you're going to find yourself in situations that are going to pit you against some people that you really care about and love. And you're going to have to make a choice. Do I deny myself? And do I deny them in order to follow the will of the Father? And what he says is that if you're going to be my disciple, you better learn how to do that. And this denying yourself, it's an act of recognizing that there's only one who redeems and one who saves. And to be honest, you're not it. I'm not it. And there's so many times that we get this impression that we can save ourselves, that that there are others that are going to come along and save us. But Jesus says, if you're going to be my disciple, then you're going to have to deny yourself. And that means that you need to understand your place and your role in all of this. And yours is not to save, that's his. So disciples operate with this understanding that this is what it means to deny yourself. The other thing Jesus said, here's the second thing. If you're going to be my disciple, you need to take up your cross. I thought denying myself was hard. Right? Couldn't we have just stopped there? If you're going to be my disciple, deny yourself. And I'm like, well, that would be enough. That's hard enough as it is. That's pretty difficult. But he didn't stop there. He said, no, I want you to deny yourself, but now you're going to have to take up your cross as well. What does that look like? As a disciple, what does it mean to take up the cross? Well, listen, the cross, at least then, right? The cross represented wrongdoing, right? If you didn't do wrong, or if you didn't disobey, or if you didn't, if you followed the laws and you didn't have to worry about the cross. But if the cross was there in front of you, you had to accept your part. You had to acknowledge your wrongdoing. You had to admit your fault. Folks, if I'm going to be a disciple and I'm going to take up my cross, I'm going to have to admit my fault. And I'm going to have to confess, these are the places where I come up short. And these are the places where I don't measure up. And these are the places where I can't measure up. And I will never be able to measure up. But praise Jesus, I don't have to, because he did it. The cross means we have to admit our fault. It represents that wrongdoing. The cross represents suffering and pain. Right? Anytime you see that image, or anybody portray that image, whether it's on a big screen or small screen or whatever, or even in a painting, any of those kind of things, you can't look at that without going, that is painful. It's hard to look at. It represents just unbelievable suffering. And so when Jesus says you're going to have to take up your cross, that means that we're going to put ourselves in the path of suffering and pain. That we're going to put ourselves in paths where it's not necessarily what we want that matters, and it's not easy. Represents suffering and pain. The cross also represented death. Denying yourself is the same as dying to yourself. Right? I love the way Paul put it, right? To live is Christ, but to die is gain. Right? It's everything. And so I'm willing to die to myself. I'm willing to deny myself. In fact, the truth is that I'm willing to give my life for him if that's what he requires of me. But I am willing to deny and to face this death to self. And listen, if you're going to be a disciple and you're going to take up your cross, you don't get to avoid any of these things. I hate to tell you, pain, suffering, even death, those things allow us to identify with Christ. And those are the things that allow Christ to identify with us at the same time. And so we go through them for the sake of the gospel. Those are the things that Jesus says, listen, you want to make an impact? You want people to really see the gospel at work in your life? You really want people to see that you're a disciple of me, that you're taking this thing seriously and that you're pursuing that thing and that you're trying to reflect more of who I am? Then these are the things that you're going to have to go through. They're going to have to see pain and suffering and this death to self, and they're going to have to see that you're denying yourself in the midst of everything that's going on, because if not, then you're not really living into the gospel, because that's what it represents. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Oh, but it's worth it. It's so worth it. Well, that's what it looks like to take up your cross. 3 steps, right? Deny yourself, take up your cross, and what's the last one? Follow me. Follow. If you're a disciple, you follow. Now here's the thing, as you go through the Gospels and you start really looking at who the disciples are and you're trying to figure all that out, what you need to understand is that to follow him represents radical sacrifice. I mean, it's not just kind of this, well, I'll follow him when it's convenient, or I'll follow him at this point in time, or I'll follow him. Jesus even said sometimes, you're only following me because I fed you, or you're only following me because you saw this miracle, or you're only following me because of this or because of that. But Jesus says, if you really want to follow me, then you're going to have to do this thing, you're going to have to put in this radical sacrifice that says that you're going to follow me regardless of anything that happens in your life. That's what I'm looking for. Here's the interesting thing, at least from my perspective, as I look at Jesus calling his disciples, right? Most rabbis, they would have a bunch of potential students around them as young children. And then as those children got older, these young boys, as they got a little bit older, they would start to weed out the ones that didn't quite measure up to what their standards were, these rabbis. And so they would weed those people out. And before long, what they were left with were these few chosen, right, either young men or older boys that they would bring alongside and say, I'm gonna invest in you, and I just want you to learn the things that I know, and I'm gonna teach you all these things. And so as disciples, if you were one of those that was chosen, your life was mapped out for you. You knew what was going to happen. You knew the plan and the trajectory that your life was on at that point in time. And really, there wasn't a lot of risk involved. Right? Because the rabbi would help take care of you until you got to the point where you were taking care of yourself, and you would have your own students along that way. But Jesus always flipped everything upside down. He says, listen, if you want to be my disciple, you follow. When Jesus called his disciples, these were guys that already had their life established. They were ones that had their job established. They knew what they were doing. They didn't measure up to anybody else, so they had to go out and get real jobs. Right? They had to go and become fishermen and tax collectors and all these different things that they had to do. And so when Jesus said, listen, follow me, it wasn't just this, oh, okay, I'll do that. It was, no, I'm giving up everything that I knew before. I'm giving up what I knew to be true. I'm giving up stability. I'm giving up my job. If I have somebody to take care of, I don't know whether they're going to be taken care of anymore. So when Jesus said, come follow me, to these guys, this was radically different. And it's the same thing for us. If he's calling you, if he's saying, be my disciple, if you're making that choice, you need to understand that this is a radical sacrifice that you're making. Following him is leaving behind what you were. Following him is leaving behind what you hoped for, and allowing him to define those things for you. Define who you're going to be. Define what you hope for. Define what your goals are going to be. Define your purpose. Following means that you're going to let him decide all those things for you. And you're going to deny yourself when your will comes into conflict with his. when he says, listen, I have this great plan for you. This is going to be great. Listen, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your family. I want you to take your wife and your 3 children, and I want you to move from every place where you're comfortable, where everything is right there, where your mother-in-law is nice and close to be able to take care of your kids when you guys want to do something. I want you to take them, and I want you to move them to a small town in southern Indiana. No. If you're going to follow, you need to be ready for radical sacrifice. You need to be ready to make sure that you're willing to leave behind everything that you had plans for in order to follow his plans. And it hurts. Man, it hurts. And it doesn't work out the way that you think it should. Sometimes it works out way better than you ever thought it would. Other times you're thinking, this is the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. And there's times when it's revealed that it was the greatest thing ever. And it's time that it's not revealed that it was the worst, why it was the worst thing ever. It's just there. But following is leaving behind all those things. Following Jesus is risky because you don't know what is to come. If you make this decision to be a disciple, you need to understand you probably won't know what the next thing is. And that's really annoying. Especially if you're a person that needs to know everything that's going on. Following Jesus, if you go back to deny yourself and take up your cross, you need to understand that following Jesus is filled with both triumph and tragedy. Just a part of it. I use this phrase a lot with kids. In fact, I used it yesterday. A young lady, I don't remember the circumstance. I use it in a lot of different circumstances. But there's moments in my life where I hear Jesus saying this 3-word phrase to me that I use on other people when it's like, I don't want to. It hurts. It's not comfortable. Find somebody else. Here's the 3 words. Are you ready? These are great 3 words. Just remember them. Get over it. Get over it. Because if you're going to choose to be a disciple, there's a lot of things that you just have to get over and be ready to move ahead. Jesus said, if you want to follow me, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow. So I was thinking about this and in terms of discipleship, and I kind of have another one to add, and I think I'm pretty sure I can back this up biblically, so we can have that conversation if you want to. Discipleship is not done in isolation, by the way. I know it sounds personal, right? If you want to follow me, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow. And I get that, right? And that's what discipleship looks like. But you need to understand it's not done in isolation. Jesus did occasionally go off by himself to spend time with the Father, but discipleship is really about relationship. It's about relationship with Jesus, and it's about relationship with others. That was another ship I could have done. We could have just done relationship. But anyway, sorry, off on a tangent. Right? Discipleship is about relationship with Jesus and a relationship with others. Mark, by the way, did a great job of covering that in his message. Again, I encourage you to go back, listen to that message again. Because you should always be learning from someone, and you should always be teaching someone. Jesus didn't just call you to follow him just for fun. But when his disciples came along, he also said, listen, I'll make you fishers of men, or I'll make you, I'll help you be something. I'll help you move some way, shape, or form. I'm going to cause you to be in relationship with other people. Why? Because these people need to know the gospel. And you need each other in order to have the strength to be able to share the gospel and to teach the gospel and to show the gospel. So you always need to be teaching someone, and someone always needs to be teaching you. And you can't do either one of those things if you're by yourself. Just can't. So real quick, I just want to look at a couple of misunderstandings of discipleship. Yeah, I think sometimes we get the wrong definition. That's why I really appreciated Mark talking about apprenticeship, because that's a great way for us to look at it. But some people say that discipleship is a study. It's not a study. There are many scriptures that address discipleship, and we should know those. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of books to read about discipleship, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't read those. I'm not saying that you shouldn't study about discipleship. There are people who have done discipleship really well, and you can study those people. But the purpose of discipleship is not to be a scholar or a disciple of scholarship. It's to be a disciple of Jesus. You ought to know that, you ought to study it, but if that study never leads any place or never causes you to act or causes you to move or to work into somebody else's life, then you're not getting what real discipleship is about. Some say discipleship is a program, and there are some amazing discipleship programs, right? You can join all kinds of things. You can do a 13-week study, right? A book study, right? I told you a couple of weeks ago, or several, maybe a couple of weeks ago. It's funny how time flies. It was probably several months ago. You know, I went through the Blackaby Discovering God process, and some would say, well, that was a discipleship program, and it's like, well, was it though? I mean, I went through it and I finished it. You know, some people do an 18-month immersive encounter, right? There are workshops and even college degrees that you can get in discipleship, in the programming of discipleship. But the purpose of discipleship is not to complete a program. I got that backwards for a long time. It's like I would invite people to walk through this discipleship program with me, and then when we were done, I just want you to do that for others. And it's like all I was doing was repeating the program. We didn't create any disciples. Just didn't. Because they never acted. They never went anywhere. Some also think, when it comes to discipleship, that at some point, especially if you think about it as a program or a study or something, you think, oh, well, good, I can graduate. So some people think that you graduate. You don't. I'm not aware of anyone who's been able to say, listen, I'm no longer a disciple. I have completed my study, I've done my programming, I've done the training, and now I look exactly like Jesus. I haven't found one like that yet. You never graduate. It doesn't mean that you have to stay in the same place with the same teacher in the same group forever, but you always have to be open to learning. You always have to be learning from somebody and teaching somebody else. The purpose of discipleship is not to graduate, but to always be in the act of becoming. I never get there, I'm just always becoming. And that's the purpose of discipleship, is to become. I guess, really, if I could boil it down, that might be it. The purpose of discipleship, as either a leader or a student, is to reveal ways to help us look more like Jesus. That's it. So I believe that discipleship really can be characterized by one thing. And that one thing, this will come as no surprise to you that have been around for a while, that one thing is an action, by the way. It's something we do. John chapter 13. I'm going to get there real quick, promise. John chapter 13, 2 verses, 34 and 35. I give you a new command. Love one another. Just as I've loved you, you are also to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my what? Disciples. This is how people will know that you are my disciples. That's what he says. If you love one another. So what does that look like? What are the marks of love? Interestingly, the marks of love for Jesus: deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Jesus says, if you love me, those are the things that you'll do. So it kind of sounds like circular thinking, right? Circular reasoning. And it is, because discipleship is this constant process. Deny yourself, take up your cross, follow Jesus, and learn to love like him. And this is the interesting thing. When you learn how to love like Jesus, all of a sudden you come to the point of realizing that there's some things that I haven't denied of myself of yet, that I've been holding on to, and I need to learn how to deny those things. So I deny those things, then I take up my cross and I follow him. And in following him, I learn how to love. And then as I learn how to love better, all of a sudden I realize, there's still some things that I haven't denied. And so I deny myself, and then I take up my cross and I follow him. And it just keeps going around, and it's great. I mean, I know it feels like, but you never get anywhere. No, you're going someplace all the time. You're learning how to look more like Jesus and how to be more like Jesus and how to love. And that's the biggest thing. I want us to be disciples. How do we know if we're doing that? Well, you don't know if you're isolated from everybody else. We only know because those that we fellowship with tell us that we're walking through that cycle. Right? How do I know if I'm loving more like Jesus? Most of the time it's because people tell me. How do I know if I'm not loving more like Jesus? Well, they're much quicker to tell me that. But it's true. Right? Those are the places where I find out. It's in the relationship. It's in the conversation. It's in the discipleship. It's in the process that we walk through that together where we learn how to love more like Jesus and whether we're accomplishing it or not. Can't do it by ourselves. And so we talked about fellowship last week, but fellowship and discipleship, those two things are connected. They are. I think Mark asked two questions, or maybe I heard the Spirit ask Mark to me through Mark these two questions. Who is discipling you, and who are you discipling? And in that process, are you learning how to love more like Jesus? Are you? Can you identify those people? Are you in a fellowship that lends itself to that kind of relationship and discipleship? So just a few weeks, we're gonna kind of close up our ships series. But one of the goals that we have out of this series, or that I have out of this series, is we need to figure out how to do discipleship better. And we need to figure out how to fellowship better. And we talked about that last week. But we need to find some groups and establish some groups that are going to help these ships move, because ships aren't meant to be in dock all the time. They're meant to move. I almost brought a picture today. I don't know if you heard, like, there was a ship that ran into the Brooklyn Bridge, right? And I just saw that today, and all the masts are broken on it, right? And it's like, I think sometimes that's the ship that the church thinks that we need to get on, is the one with all the broken masts. So at least that's the way it feels sometimes. But it's like, no. We need ships that are actually going to move. We need ships that are functioning. We need ships they're going to take us places. But you're going to have to decide if you choose to be a disciple. Are you going to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow him? You have to decide if you will choose to deny yourself or not. Father, I'm going to decide for me. I've decided to follow you, to follow Jesus with everything that I have. We all need to make that decision ourselves.